Hey guys, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. So this is a continuation of a very long series of videos that I've chosen to dive into. And this talks a little bit about the changes that are going on in our body, the changes that are going on Earth. I'm talking a little bit about advanced technology, quantum computers, and just really overall, it's a way of, for me, that I play with quantum communication, which I call somatic writing. So the reason I'm sharing this is because oftentimes I do this form of writing. When I started doing this form of writing and I was kind of in flow, some people call it automatic writing, some people call it channeling. I'm just connecting in with a more expansive version of me, being in the state of openness to receive the information that I already know or I already have access to. But what I was called to do was share it in this particular way. And my guides call it Jabberwocky. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it exactly, but it's the same. Was it Lewis Carroll had written Alice in Wonderland, and he does a lot of very playful ideas with words. So a lot of the way that I write is very Alice in Wonderland. I go down a rabbit hole, and within this, there are many different anomalies in the writing that essentially maps or pings off of certain multidimensional meanings. And it's a vocab, my guides call it vocab array. So it's an array, okay, it's this rainbow of color, frequency, and sound. And that's why some people read what I write or hear what I write as I share it and express it, and it makes them feel a certain way because it's essentially pinging off of each individual's mapping system. So it's a sound, it holds a vibration, it holds a frequency, a range, a pitch, if you will, a musical scale in which I harmonize or bring through many different layers of points of reference, or I extract from these different reference points and I pull them through and I weave them in a very poetic way that essentially tells a story. So I'm going to share this story. I might just start calling this story time. The last video that I did was pretty, let's say, perhaps a little boring for some of us, unless you're into quantum computing. Then if you're into quantum computing, it even seems more boring because you already know what I'm talking about. I'm not obviously a scientist or into quantum computing. In fact, the fact that I'm even speaking about it is hilarious to me. But again, part of this is about me sharing how I communicate, how I use my environment in the fullness and the highest capacity for an exchange of information to bring through the portal of me different access points. And this harmonizes with for different reasons, and we'll get into that later. So again, this talks about the Earth changes, talks about changes in quantum computing, changes in concepts about our reality. And I was kind of shown this bubble. Our bubbles are expanding. When we expand, and I did a video on this maybe 2 videos ago, into this bubble, we hold with it everything that was inside of it before, but now we expand out into a broader, more expansive, and we are essentially enfolded in or encapsulated within a larger, now I'm stuck on array, I guess that would be equivalent as well, but we become more connected to everything. So I'm going to do my best to go through this somewhat linearly, even though it's a non-linear representation of messages and things that I've received. So I will eventually get to gold because I do talk about gold. I'm only in the first several paragraphs of a very long writing that I did. And what I will say about what I wrote about last time to give a little recap before I go into it, because I'm not going to read it all. You can go back and read the first videos that I did, which were tremolo, quantum communication, organic and inorganic technology. And then the first one was just quantum communication, organic and inorganic technology. And I believe in both of those, I might have read the entire piece. You can also read it on keepitsimplestarseeds.com. And I'm sharing how to link up into multiple. So I'm just going to say in a nutshell, and that way I can keep it simple, starseeds. We're going into a new cradle of time. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily changing timelines, but we're changing how we interact with time. And as we do that, we're changing how we interact with each other, because our mass, our scales, our value, what we value and how we value things is changing. Our ability to hold information is changing, and how this affects how quickly we move through space from one perspective, the velocity, the speed. It affects how much we're holding, which affects where we're going. That's it in a nutshell. So you don't have to watch the rest of the video if you know. But what's happening is, I talked a little bit in my previous videos about quantum scaling. I talked about our frequency is getting longer, which means we are holding the frequency for longer periods of time, which changes our ability to harmonize and essentially weave together many different aspects of who and what we really are, or connect back into source. So this changes how we interact with our reality, AKA our matrix, AKA the ether, plasma, so on and so forth. This has to do with light waves and sound waves. It has to do with particle acceleration, as we accelerate our particles, which are our waves, which are our sound, our vibration. We then change the platform or the foundation in which we exist. This then lights things up. It heats things up. It causes a chemical response, or vice versa. The chemical response changes how we interact with everything. We can use those both interchangeably. And this essentially helps us to dissolve the old layers, integrate with the new ones, and we become this weaving, which I talked about in my previous video, of realities, of densities. We exchange information at a faster pace, changing our equilibrium, etc., etc. I was talking about this higher sound, treble bound infusion is what I said in my last video, essentially is peeling back what was holding our old reality together. When we peel it back, we can then see what was underneath the masking tape. And in the previous video, I talk about ducting, which has to do with physics. So you can play with that if you want. And then that allows this sound to escape and pull out or surge out, which is an electrical surge or a tidal wave of energy, which then essentially ripples out and pushes. It increases how far it goes, and it goes into a higher bandwidth, a deeper layer, and it bonds with it. And I'd drawn in my previous video with my energy update on September 2nd, these bubbles expanding out. We expand out to meet the bubbles, and then we look back and we see this inner bubble, we see what was inside of it. Whereas before, we were inside looking out, seeing how far we could go, seeing where we are. Now we've expanded out, we're turning back and we're looking down, not really, but we're looking back, at what we were, where we were, but we have more knowingness about that reality. Therefore, that reality takes on a different meaning. And that to me is a play on words with the golden mean. It takes on a different value. It takes on a different measurement. And we're counteracting this sway, this swing with our harmonization, our heart coherent frequency, our higher frequency and vibration. That is what is creating the ability for us to merge with the new realities, if that makes sense. So again, you can refer back to my other video, inner, outer, outer, inner. And as we do this, we're weaving together, bridging, dissolving, right? So the membrane becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, and then we merge with it. And we sound out, where we out sound these lower frequencies and harmonies. We dissolve this membrane. We're birthing through this, expanding out. And what this does is this creates a new bandwidth, a harmonization that we then are creating from. And we're holding it. So it's like this rubber band that is hydrated from one perspective because of our heart coherence, so on and so forth. So we bond with this, which means we're creating new elements. We're creating how we interact with the old elements. We're creating new bonds. And this allows for an unfoldment in a development in a new cradle of time. And again, I talk about that in my previous video. We'll go into that again a little bit more in this video. It's a Newtonian cradle of time. I talked about how this cradle of time holds the body in a cocoon or a layer. I talked about miraculous conception. We're beginning again. We have this inbound technology, which from my perspective is the heart. It's the crystals that are vibrating in the ears, the body, the heart, the glandular activation, the fascia, that then pushes out all organic and inorganic. I refer to it as loosh because that's kind of a term that's been used loosely within this community of people that do what I do. And really, it's just stuck energy. So all of this stuck energy that's been held within this capsule has been, we're able to hear it, see it, absorb it, and essentially from that. And I was also shown that it's not that we're closing out a cycle of time. All we're doing is we're birthing as we merge with this cycle of time. So a lot of times we have this idea that we're closing out one cycle and then we start in a new cycle. But those cycles are spirals, so they're all connected. It's not that one closes and collapses entirely, although from an old paradigm or an old perspective, that's kind of what did happen. It would collapse and then poof, we come out the other end, we birth or squirt from that pineal gland perspective, right? We birth through the pine cone or the black hole and come out into this new space. But they're still connected because everything is entangled from my perspective. And again, this is just my own interpretation of what I'm tapping into. Talked about cleaning out the cobwebs. This changes the expectancy rate. So this changes how quickly we're able to create things. And I talked a lot about the directional exchange, tremolo, sing-song capacitors. And so we're going to go into the archaeology concepts of quantum computing. And that's where I'm going to begin with this. So again, you can go back and listen to me reading this whole story, or you can read along if you want to. So what I wrote, I'm just going to share this one little paragraph, and we're going to share what I'm talking about with this mass scale. The archaeology concepts that quantum computing on a mass scale have been built upon, will shift to convey the new news, and birthing. Remember to play with these words. For your vocabulary, vocab array must include the portmanteau, the portentee readings, giving the opportunities to link up multiple ports. This will have a calming effect, so to speak, on the capacitor switch, the economic pole, the pole, and this will find a counterbalance, counterswing, countersway. So in a nutshell, and then I'll break that down. Break it down again. Okay. These old concepts. So what is archaeology? Well, archaeology is the study of the beginning of science, man, buildings. So I watched this really cool show the other night, Expedition Unknown. It's cheesy, but I love it. And he was digging up, talking about the Etruscans, I believe, during the Roman times. And that the Romans, spoiler alert, sorry, Josh, spoiler alert. So the Romans essentially built on top of the Etruscans. So all this idea that we have that the Romans created this and the Romans created that, they didn't really do it. It was the Etruscans that did. Although the Etruscans are part of the Roman, they're Roman, but they weren't, they were like a subset, a bubble within a bubble of the Roman people. I don't even think in the show he talks about the Romans didn't even know they were Romans. They're like, who are these people? Well, they're you. Anyways, that's a whole other story. So essentially, but to find this through archaeology, they had to dig under the medieval times. So the Etruscans date back previous to medieval. So they had to dig under these layers to find the beginning. So the archaeology concepts that quantum computing on a mass scale have been built upon will shift to convey the news. So they have to change in order to convey the new news. That means what they've been built upon will have to change. The idea of the beginning, right? In the word, the beginning was the word was one. So I love it because if I dig in, pun intended, to the word archaeology, for example, and I'm on Etym Online, which is a portmanteau of etymology and online. So it's a combination of those two words. So archaeo is before vowels, archae, word forming element in scientific compounds, meaning ancient, olden, primitive, primeval, from the beginning. Ancient, primeval, evil, not to be confused, primeval, to be the first, and branch of knowledge and science, ology. So I talk about quantum computing here, and so computers in general use branches. You have information that's put into it, and then that affects the output of the information. So it has to start with the foundation or a base, and we know that artificial intelligence and quantum computing has evolved. However, it's still based on our current understanding from somewhat of reality, or on a certain schematic or mathematical composition that had to be placed in this technology. So the beginning, or the first concepts that quantum computing on a mass scale have been built will shift. So I'm just going to share screen briefly because it's important and fun from my perspective to just take a moment and look at a quantum computer. And some may not care about quantum computing. This is we created this, man did. And on top of that, can be used as within, so without. So as I write this, I'm talking about the human body as well. But I'm also talking about technology and what we understand about the workings of our reality. is all shifting from my perspective. So I'm sharing screen here, and I'm just going to go into quantum computer. I have a little delay here because I have so many screens open and my computer is a dinosaur. But quantum computing is a type of computation whose operations can harness the phenomena of quantum mechanics, such as superposition, interference, and entanglement. I don't remember if I just talked about entanglement, but I think I did a little bit. So I'm not going to go into all of those. Here's a picture of a quantum computer. I invite you guys to look this up on your own and just kind of tune in to what this looks like. So quantum mechanics, here's a picture of quantum mechanics. So it's a type of computation, okay, in which operations can harness the phenomena. So they're calling quantum mechanics a phenomena. So quantum mechanics is a fundamental theory in physics that provides a description of the physical properties of nature at the scale of atoms and subatomic particles. It's the foundation of all quantum physics, including quantum chemistry, quantum field theory, et cetera, and this is hydrogen. So I'm just going to click on this briefly because I talk a lot about hydrogen. This shows the wave functions of the electron in a hydrogen atom at different energy levels. So these are the energy levels, and this is what the wave functions look like. It cannot predict, quantum mechanics cannot predict the exact location of a particle in space, only the probability of finding it at different locations. I just think just that in a nutshell, get it, a shell, electron shell. Oh boy, apparently I have a lot in common with that, with the nerdiness of anyways, lots of goofiness I have to share here. Thank you guys for tuning in. So basically it's talking about these subatomic particles, and it's a theory. It's a fundamental theory, and it provides a description of the physical properties of nature at the scale of atoms and subatomic particles. And subatomic particles compose an atom. So it's like just stuff you can't see it, right? And there's so much more we could go into here. And I don't know what superposition is, but let's look at it. Oh boy, I love that. So it's a fundamental state that two quantum states can be added together, superposed, and the result will be another valid quantum state. Well, I kind of see that as what I drew. The last thing is interference. So we'll talk about this. I highly encourage you to check out Dan Winter. I have not looked at all of his information, but the more I look at it, the more I realize he's just an amazing wealth of information. Fractalfield.com. In physics, interference is a phenomenon in which two waves combine by adding their displacement together at every single point in space and time. So everywhere, right? I would think, to form a resultant wave of greater, lower, or the same amplitude. Talks about the interaction of these waves. All right, so again, quantum computers harness this phenomena. And then entanglement, when a group of particles generated interact or share spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle cannot be described independently of each other. Now, if we're in this ether and we are in, this shows a very well-defined model. Okay, so if we're in this space, we're always entangling with everything. We are the ripple. We are the wave. So everything is entangled. It's all electrical. It's all magnetic, right? From one perspective, the original. So this means, and I play with archaeology because I see this as key. I see that as key and energy. And I see this as arcing, which is electricity. And interestingly enough, quantum computing is based on electricity. Now, because I'm called to look at this, just one moment. So this led me to density matrix. And I went into density matrix from quantum computing. I can't remember why, but I think it's because of the quantum mechanics. So again, we're in quantum mechanics. What is that? So this quantum computer is created through electricity, right? And we place certain information inside of it, which communicates through electrical creation, through physical creation. So here we are back at quantum mechanics. In quantum mechanics, a density matrix is a matrix that describes the quantum state, okay, again, of a physical system. So this is only describing a physical system. So we're not describing necessarily, let's call it an etheric or spiritual system. This is what we can physically supposedly measure. It allows for the calculation of the probabilities, and this is where this gets kind of fun, of the outcomes of any measurement performed upon this system. So I think this is funny because, my goodness, I think it's funny for so many reasons. But if I go back, we built upon, we're in a density, we're in a matrix, right? Our reality is based on a matrix. So we're using a lot of these words with quantum computers interchangeably. We're describing the reality of quantum computers, and that's how we might describe our reality. Of course, we've been, people have said we're living inside of a matrix, we're living inside of a computer program. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not here to argue one way or another. Again, I like to play with all of these concepts. So I like to use the words, though, to describe how we are accelerating. What does it look like when we're moving through time? So quantum computing has been built upon it's double meaning here. So the archaeology concepts, the beginning of quantum computing and what our concept of how reality works on a big scale, like that we all think, will shift to convey the new news. So it has to shift so that we can convey the new news, and we'll get to that later. So a mass scale is also a play on words. So this quantum computing, so the new news, the birthing. Well, what's interesting about this, it's conveying this new birthing and this new news. If I go into our density matrix, so I was saying our density is shifting. We are expanding. Therefore, the mass that we hold is changing. Therefore, the scale, how much we measure, the measurements in which we measure our mass also shifts. And the harmony, the sound, the measurements, the scale, the rhythm also shifts because our whole reality is changing. We are raising our vibration. And so what we knew as our reality in this little bubble is expanding out to meet and blend with these and merge. This is a subset, a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. So now all of this information now needs to expand as well. And therefore, what we know and have come to understand about our reality, we now know more. So this is going to have to reflect in the analytics, mathematics, our concept of reality. And so they've been built on that. So the electricity, the actual device has been built upon certain ways. So as we add to this, we change how we build it and what it's based on. So if we look briefly at a scale, well, this is a scale of music. So this is shifting, right? In music theory, a scale is a set of musical notes ordered by fundamental frequency or pitch. Let's pause there just for a moment, because if we look at a fundamental frequency, okay, it's defined as the lowest frequency of a periodic waveform. This makes me think of the periodic table of elements, periodic Tale of Time. Tale as old as time. What is that song? Oh, Beauty and the Beast. The Rose. Anyways, refer to simply as the fundamental frequency. It's the lowest partial present. So it is perceived as the lowest. We'll come back to that in just a moment. And then a pitch is a perceptual property of sound that allows their ordering on a frequency-related scale, and it makes it possible to judge sounds as higher or lower. So the scale, right, is ordered by that. So it's also a play on words. Our pitch, the order of the notes, and the waveform according to the frequency is shifting. So it's going higher. What we can perceive as low and high is shifting. We're expanding out. Oh, we can hear this now. We can hear that now. We can sense this now. Scale is also measurements, right? We think of Libra, the scales, right? And the density also shifts. Now, I just want to go back to quantum computing. It's a matrix that describes the quantum, so a density matrix. What is a quantum state? Well, you can't see it necessarily, but it's mathematical and it provides a probability distribution for the outcomes of each possible measurement on a system. So these are just probabilities based on what the computer is allowing. Knowledge of the quantum state together with the rules for the system's evolution in time exhausts all that can be predicted about the system's behavior. A mixture of quantum states is again a quantum state. Ones that cannot be written as a mixture of other states are called pure quantum states, while others are mixed quantum states. Now, pure states are also known as state vectors or wave functions. The latter term applying particularly when they are represented as functions of position or momentum. This is all key. These are all tied in with what's shifting. The momentum, the speed of things, how much momentum isn't just speed, it's how much force it has behind its movement. We're going back into hydrogen, okay? And it talks about the vectors are identified by the principal quantum number. I'll come back to that, maybe. No, I'm not. It's too much. But I am going to say, going back to this, mixed quantum states is where we go back in with the density matrix. So we're describing a physical system. It's using the Born rule. So could it be possible? So the Born rule is a key postulate of quantum mechanics that gives the probability that a measurement of a quantum system will yield a given result. But if everything that we know is changing, therefore the result that we expect it to yield, or the probability of that measurement, is also going to shift. Perhaps where we are located in the solar system, how our relationship to other planets, how far away we are from things, how our body is conducting energy, all of it. And to go a little deeper, it states that the probability density of finding a particle at a given point when measured is proportional to the square of the magnitude of the particle's wave function at that point. So this has to do with how it was functioning or the magnitude of the wave function. So maybe how far it goes, how much of an impact it has. So we have to have an idea. But if we're having a bigger impact than we realize, I'm just taking it back to simplicity, us, then how can we predict what that measurement is? So it changes literally the circumference that we're working within. It changes the density that we're working within, therefore the probability and the measurements of the quantumness of what it is that we're working from. And I found that funny because I wrote birthing. So I wrote, it will shift and convey the new news and the birthing, born. So maybe the measurements are off. Maybe the measurements change, or they have to make these adjustments to then find or recalculate the outcomes or the measurements or probabilities of our reality. And noose was a reference to a slip knot. So hopefully I'm still recording because that was a lot for me. Okay. So I could go into this in even more layers. I won't. I'll keep going. So remember to play with these words. For your vocabulary, vocabula, I kind of think of nebula there. Your vocab array must include the portmanteau, which is a combination of the words, the port and T readings. I always think of giving the opportunities to link up multiple ports. So back to electricity. All this is about electricity and entanglement. So I, through my vocabulary, which isn't just language in the linear form and letters, it's an alchemization of tying together different nodes and access ports or points in space-time, or openings, if you will, to plug into. The T readings are divination. You use the T in a cup. That just takes me into a whole other spin. I'm a little teacup, short and stout. I'm just seeing a reference to divination. So we're talking about the future now, which is it giving somebody a T reading, or it's talking about you can read a person through T. You're using something in order to see something else. The quantum computer is a T reading. My writing is a T reading. Somebody who is psychic or has the ability to connect into this is giving a T reading, as just an example. So my guidance system is saying you got to include all this, include it all, because it's quantum. You can't see it, but it is linking, tying into, opportunize, linking to multiple ports, which is also different time points in time. And an array is so much, soma, a systematic arrangement of similar objects, usually in rows or columns. Well, when we write, it is linking up objects in rows or columns. And I am going to come back to this because I also see it as a 12-tone and serial composition, the presentation of simultaneous 12-tone sets. So from my perspective, I'm linking into multiple tones and dimensions or subsets, bubbles, and so much more. I also thought it would be kind of fun to share an interferometer because I talk about that a lot. So if you look at a telescopic array, it provides a higher resolution of things. And a visual array is a model of the primary visual cortex. So this is symbolic as well. And it matches the cortex in functionality while the structure is orthogonal. So that's a shape, making it easier to implement on a computer. What? That's another spin. So I'm playing with all of this. And I like this as well. An array data structure is an arrangement of items at equally spaced addresses on a computer memory. So I'm porting into these different places or addresses in the memory of, or the information of the universe, the omniverse. And guess what? It's identified by at least one array index or key, archaeology. An array is stored such that the position of each element can be computed from its index tuple by a mathematical formula. This is a mathematical formula, what I've written. Apparently, I can break down a lot of what I've written in mathematics. I have yet to explore that mountain. This will have a calming effect. Now, not necessarily this writing, but it calms me as I write it. But what will have a calming effect? I'll get back to that in just a minute. This will have a calming effect, so to speak, on the capacitor switch. The economic pole will find a counterbalance, a counter swing, a counter sway. Tick-tock, Clarice. So it's like time, tick-tock. So a calming effect happens, which is if you've got scattered, it soothes it. Think about the energies that we've got going on. When we talk about the economic pull, think about what's going on in our economy. It's a lot. There's a lot of ups and downs. It's swaying this way, it's swaying that way. Our poles, right? The magnetic poles are feeling a little wonky. But this that I'm writing about in this technology, in the supercomputer that is the human, will have a counterbalance or a counter sway. This has to do with the heart, by the way, you guys, and I'll get back to that later. I'm referring to gold. I'm referring to our own particle acceleration is actually balancing out the economic changes. As within, so without. So we're seeing this craziness, but we're actually it's going to have a calming effect physically in the physical, and that ripples out. What will? Cleaning out this stuff. So all of this clean out that's happening, these changes on the earth, changes in our body, changes in the sun, changes in our planet system, and our learning of these new things actually is helping to balance things, and it calms the nervous system when we go into this heart capacitor. The capacity for more, the capacity for quantumness. We begin to exchange with our universe in a different way. And this helps to balance out this unequal feeling sway. Counter swing, counter sway. Now, this is all a play on words because earlier in my previous video, I spoke about the Newtonian cradle of time. So I'm seeing this has to do with that cradle of time, that sway, like this ball hits through these other ones and knocks it out. And then it comes back and the momentum, velocity, momentum, the mass hits it and then pulls that. So it's this constant rhythm and it feels like we're coming and then we come back in and boom. And it's just, again, I'm not going to go back into that because that was, you can look that up if you feel called to. And I talked about it a little bit in my previous video. And I'm still making sense of what that means. This is all new to me in this lifetime. Okay, so it will have a calming effect on the capacitor switch. Well, what is a capacitor switch? Now, this has to do with advanced technology. This has to do with technology that we're already using from one perspective. So I'm on semanticscholar.org, semantic. Okay, the switching of capacitors, so it's called capacitor switching phenomena. The switching of capacitors differs from other switching by causing relatively large surge currents and possibly over voltages. The performance of circuit breakers in this service has been found by recent experiments to depend on the power supply system, as well on the size of the capacitor banks. I think I said something about the economy, the banks. When circuit breakers open with no delayed restriking of the archaeology, they avoid the possibility of causing undesirably high current and voltage surges. So if we've got too much happening, I'll try to provide all these links later in what I wrote. And I want to just go back into this a little bit. So from one perspective, we are essentially creating this. We're the bridge, right? We're the capacitor switches. Us expanding our capacity, and I keep talking about compression. We expand, we create this higher capacity. We feel more compassion. Our heart opens. Our electrical signals are then stimulated, and we are able to balance the conductivity and the higher charge that's coming from all angles. And we're able to harness that energy, and we're able to utilize it so that the voltage doesn't fry us out. So we have to find that balance. From another perspective, basically this technology, this future technology that's being utilized within the earth, that's another, or around the earth. I haven't even gotten into that yet. So back to we're creating this voltage. It's creating a surge, but we are the surge protectors. If you're into electricity and all of that, which I'm just learning about, but that's basically what this is saying from one perspective, but this is also literal. And when I go in and I say this balances out the capacitor switch in the economic pole, well, this supply system, depends on the power supply system, as well as the size of the capacitor banks. So there's so many more layers, but that's what I'm talking about. You can go in and play with that if you want to. I'll come back to that at a different time because I don't quite understand it fully yet. But sometimes as I read down the line, I can come back to and tie it all together. This has something to do with the cradle of time. It has something to do with the momentum. And I said earlier in the writing, I had mentioned the word surge. And I had written, just to share, if you go back and look at it, well, I talked about all angles, sound waves, light waves, platform, quantum scaling effect. The sound layer of alchemy pulls out, surging, if you will, in a layer and a bandwidth. So if I pull those together, and it says here that avoids the possibility of undesirably high current and voltage surges. We're balancing this out. And this does have something to do with the circuit breakers with no delayed restriking of the arc. That's a whole other, literally can of worms or wormhole. Oh, so fun. And you guys, just because I want to be really thorough here and share, in case you feel like, well, what is a restriking of the arc? Not that you will, but I went ahead and looked up what is a restriking of the arc in electricity. And it says the transient voltage that appears across the circuit breaker contacts immediately after the arc extinction or at current zero during the arcing period. I'm totally seeing a parallel here. It's called restriking voltage. The voltage is so named because the arc can restrike only during the existence period of the transient voltage, which I don't know what that is, but we are going through a transition. We're going through a phase of transition. All of this sparks an electrical convergence. We're merging realities from my perspective. And I see this, there is this theme that I'm hearing that we're seeing gold is the new currency. We're seeing a solar flare is going to bring about the end of the earth. So I see this as, yeah, maybe that's what you got. People are reading into this literally. Whereas a lot of what's happening is subatomic. A lot of this is quantum. So it has multiple meanings, and that might be something to play with. So we'll see if I wrote about more of that later in the writing. So you guys, these massive surge. So also we are the surge protectors from this solar activation. We are working together with the earth and with the sun, because we're all part of, we are quantumly entangled. We're all part of this wave. So when we raise our frequency and vibration, as the sun and the earth raise their frequency and vibration, we then become this electrical arcing that helps to balance out. I keep seeing the vision of Tesla playing with all of the connections with electricity, right? So we become this circuitry. And then we balance out this sway, this different acceleration of time, which changes because of how much we're expanding. And that is the amount of light that we're holding goes up. And as I read this, what I wrote was, let go of the resistance and need to figure it out. Let go of the resistance and need to figure out arbitrary, which also, and I'm going to end on this note because I've actually covered quite a bit. And this is quite time consuming, speaking of time. So I don't have time to do this quite all day long. So let go of the resistance and need to figure out arbitrary, a tributary, a whole cannoli. There is an expression tunneling through, offering a new common morality view. Play on words. I could go into so much more. I'm misspelling cannoli, but okay. In a nutshell, let go of the need to figure it out. Let go of the resistance. Don't resist what's happening. It's happening. You know, if we're in a place of fear about all of the solar activations that we're receiving, it only makes things harder. It makes things more difficult. And so this was also a message to me, because I get locked into this, like, why me? Why am I writing about this? Because I can, because I can only, because I'm tunneling into multiple things, because I'm going down the rabbit hole, because I have fun with it, because it brings me joy. So let go of this resistance. When we're trying to figure everything out, we're pushing against something. When we open to it, it just comes to us more naturally. It comes to me in synchronicity, in conversation, in TV, in books that I'm reading, which I haven't really read any books lately in a while, but and basically a tributary is when rivers meet. So let go of the need to figure out a river. We're meeting rivers. Things are flowing, right? Look at the whole cannoli. Don't just take a piece of it, you know, put it all together. There is an expression, a higher expression that's tunneling through, offering a new common morality view. Well, morality view is actually a thing. And in a nutshell, though, because of what's happening, we're starting to look at the morals. We're looking, this is a play on words. When I put play on words, more reality, it's tunneling through. We're going underneath into the archaeology of things, and we're seeing more common morality views. We are agreeing what morality means. What does it mean to be moral and to be kind to one another and to have compassion? What does that look like? We're starting to agree and get to the juice of that. Instead of trying to separate everything, right? So this is the, in a nutshell, meaning, and it just gives us that ability to see things. We raise our morals, our standards, but it also gives us a common more reality view. We get to see more of our reality. And when I see tunneling through, I'm like, break out of prism, tunnel through to the prism, go through the wormhole. We're creating this tunnel, this Rosen Bridge. Is it Rosen Bridge? I don't know if it's a tunnel, but whew. And we'll just kind of briefly go into that, and then we're going to end on this note. So I'll just kind of play with this just a smidge here. So arbitrary etymology, again, I'm on this particular site. Deciding by one's own discretion. Now, I did not know this. I just was like, okay, let's play with that. Depending on one's own judgment, depending on the will. So ungoverned by reason or will. So arbiter, a person who has power of judging absolutely according to his own pleasure in a dispute or issue. Oh boy. Huh. I just see this as such a play on words here, because it also says to come, go, one who goes somewhere. Well, that's vague, but let go of the need to figure out arbitrary, a tributary, a whole cannoli. So don't hang on to it, because the arbitrary point of view is it's up to us to decide. But on the flip side, we're uncertain about things. And it talks about an arbiter as a person who has power of judging absolutely according to his own pleasure. So let go of the fact that other people, right, are telling us we have to use our own discretion, our own discernment. Let it go. Use our own discernment. Don't try to figure it all out. But at the same time, use our discernment. And a tributary is, again, play on words. It's the rivers coming into one, flowing in from all different areas, and then a whole cannoli. So a whole cannoli to me is actually a whole. If you look at a cannoli, it's a shape. It's holding a lot of things. It's also a circular shape. And I bet you there's more to that, and I'll come back to it later. But this offers an expression. It's tunneling through, and it offers a new common morality view. This existential awareness drips down, feeding a collective, a higher arc key, a higher feed key, allowing for a solar stream of canonized information. So the cannoli comes back to a canon. And when we canonize something, we make it, we're declaring, like we canonize, we make things, oh, you're a saint. We're canonizing it. That's a whole other can of worms. Oops, it looks like I might have combined. Yeah, I combined writings, so I'll have to figure that out. But this is a good sign, a good place to end. So this existential awareness drips down, feeding a collective. So I want to just share. This is about, so archy. What did we talk about earlier? The arcing, the capacitor switch. What is a restriking arc? Restriking voltage, right? 0 point, a 0 period, breaker at current 0. Pretty sure this is a play on words as well. And this is, it allows for a slower stream. So I want to talk briefly about a synchronicity that happened. When I hear drip down, I think of the glandular activation. So this existential awareness that we're learning, that we now become aware of, that we now are creating within our morals, drips down and feeds a collective of hierarchy. So this is all a play on words, you guys. We could say hierarchy, like the heirs. So that bubble that we have of being in a higher state of awareness drips down and actually feeds the hierarchy. We give them the ability to expand, which some may not be like, oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want to feed a hierarchy. But it's this idea of those that think they're above us are actually, from one perspective, below us on the ladder. I say us, those that are stuck in that smaller circle I talked about in my other box, in the box, they're stuck in a box, but they think they've got it all figured out. But actuality, the shape is a circle, not a box. And we are activating and holding this charge so that this existential awareness can drip down and feed our brothers and sisters, because we have this idea that these hierarchies are not good. And that may be true from one perspective, depending on what we think good or bad is. But from another perspective, this hierarchy are our brothers and sisters. So it's like as within, so without, as above, so below. So this knowledge and this existential awareness of who we really are, and it drips down from our glands, our pineal gland, our pituitary gland, and it feeds our hierarchy, our heart. This is our arcing, our circuitry. And the sound, it's a higher feed key. It feeds back into the collective in this circuitry of wave forms, information, and energy. It is the entanglement. It's spooky. It's action at a distance. And so what this does from another perspective is this is actually projecting into the future. So we're sending this out into the future, versions of us. This then comes back to us into the past and drips down and helps to feed us. And that's a whole other part of this video. But I saw this, whether or not we agree with the other teachers out there and what they have to share, I do take snippets based on my synchronicities, based on what my guidance team is leading me to look at. So I will get a ping, watch this, listen to this, take it with a grain of salt, right? Realize that not all information is 100%, but there's a reason that you need to listen to this. And I did that with, again, Magenta Pixie's video. She did Magenta Pixie did a video on gold, which we haven't even gotten to that part yet in this video. I'm going to end on this node. But she talks about gold and her vision that she had through her channeling with the 9, which from my perspective are plasma beings. They talk about this gold glitter, which I always write about gold dust. And I was writing about gold and glitter. And her video was basically a description of what I was writing about quite some time ago, back last year sometime. So I recognize that she's tuning into a portion of the piece of the puzzle. And all of us have our own filtration system, our drip, drip, drip that feeds us. And then we then determine, or we essentially figure out what our perspective is and then feed that back into the collective. So she had a beautiful description, though, that it literally is, we're creating this, which is affecting our future, which then actually comes back into our past, because time, a lot of the things we have floating around us in space, it's hard to describe, but essentially we're affecting us now. It's like we're creating this loop and we're feeding us in an open source system, because we're connecting into so much. It's not just closed and we are only doing this. That's also play on words though, so I'll get to that at a different piece of information. So this is a play on words where we're actually helping the hierarchy in a very loving way that then changes our reality. Like someone like myself is not involved necessarily in the hierarchy. I'm not in the hierarchy, let me reframe that, of our, let's say, political, social, economic system. I did not choose to create those rules, but inadvertently, we are creating them because of this common morality view that is rippling out. And so it affects everything. Therefore, it affects the lawmakers. they have to change the laws, just like the quantum computing might shift slightly in order to match our frequency set as a collective, in order to match love frequency set, in order to reflect back to us this reality, not the old reality. It doesn't fit anymore. So what this does then is it's also creating a higher feed of information, like a computer feed, right? What gets sent out and received back. This also is, it heightens, so the activity of the sun and our heightened vibration, the tremolo, the shaking of the earth, the plasma from the sun, and our response to it by going into our heart and staying in that hierarchy, that key of light, then allows us to feed from that. We feed from the sun, we feed from the earth, and we then change everything now for the future. And therefore, that future version of us is changing the past because we're changing it now. Wow. Okay. I know I just went, whoo. So this allows us actually to slow down the stream and to balance it out so that things don't get too wonky. So the sun doesn't explode, so that our earth doesn't implode, but we are imploding in a good way. And so is the earth in a good way. It's turning it inside out, right? The slip knot, the noose, which I didn't even go into that. And I will maybe save that for another video. Whew. Yeah, so in love and light, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you made it this far, wow. The next video I'm going to focus on, although I kind of messed up my quakes and rattles. I'm talking about spooky action at a distance, the Iron Throne. Maybe I already talked about that. I feel like I combined two different writings. Maybe I did, but that's all right. We'll talk about it next time. In love and light, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Namaste.